Imagine a country that, less than half a century ago, was predominantly poor, rural, and economically isolated from much of the global economy. Now, imagine that same country becoming one of the world's largest economies, the world's largest manufacturing powerhouse, a major technological competitor to the United States, and one of the most influential actors in global geopolitics. That country is China. But China's rise was not the result of a single invention, a single leader, or a single economic policy. It was the outcome of a long and complex transformation involving economic reform, industrialization, education, technological development, international trade, infrastructure, state capacity, cultural diplomacy, and geopolitical strategy. Since 1978, China's economy has grown at an extraordinary pace. According to the World Bank, China's average annual GDP growth since the beginning of the reform and opening up period has exceeded 9%, while nearly 800 million people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. But the more important question is this: how did China transform economic growth into technological power, and technological power into global influence? To understand the answer, we need to go back to the beginning. For much of the 20th century, China's economy operated under a highly centralized system. After 1949, China pursued state-led economic policies that caused major social and economic disruptions. By the late 1970s, Chinese leaders faced a fundamental challenge. How could a country with a huge population modernize its economy? The turning point came after 1978. Under Deng Xiaoping, China began what became known as the policy of reform and opening up. The objective was not simply to copy Western capitalism. Instead, China experimented with a hybrid economic model. Markets were gradually introduced, private enterprise expanded, foreign investment was encouraged, agricultural production was restructured, special economic zones were created, and Chinese companies were increasingly connected to international markets. The first major lesson of China's transformation was therefore simple. China did not abandon state planning completely. It combined state direction with market mechanisms. This combination became one of the defining characteristics of the Chinese development model. The results were dramatic. The World Bank estimates that since 1978, China's economy has transformed from a low-income economy into an upper-middle-income economy, while hundreds of millions of people have escaped extreme poverty. But economic reform was only the beginning. China needed something else: access to the world. During the 1980s and 1990s, China increasingly integrated itself into global production networks. Foreign companies discovered an enormous advantage. China possessed a vast labor force, rapidly improving infrastructure and expanding industrial capacity. Factories multiplied, ports expanded, highways and railways connected industrial regions. Cities such as Shenzhen transformed from relatively small settlements into major technological and economic centers. Then came another historic turning point. On December 11, 2001, China officially joined the World Trade Organization. WTO membership accelerated China's integration into the global trading system. Chinese factories became deeply connected to international supply chains. Consumer electronics, textiles, machinery, furniture, chemicals, toys, and countless other products were increasingly manufactured in China. The phrase "Made in China" became one of the most recognizable labels in the world. But there was something deeper happening. China was not simply producing more goods, it was learning. Every factory created knowledge. Every export relationship created experience. Every foreign investment project created new technological and managerial connections. China was gradually moving up the industrial value chain. At first, the country competed primarily through low-cost manufacturing. Then it began producing increasingly sophisticated machinery, electronics, telecommunications equipment, automobiles, batteries, renewable energy technologies, and digital products. The transformation was from low-cost production to industrial scale, to technological capability. And this transition would become crucial to China's emergence as a technological power. Economic transformation cannot continue indefinitely without human capital. China therefore invested heavily in education. The expansion of higher education became particularly important after the late 1990s. China viewed universities not only as institutions for education, but also as engines of economic development, scientific research, and technological innovation. According to UNESCO, the share of young people under the age of 24 with tertiary qualifications increased from approximately 6% in 2000 to 41% in 2020. By 2024, China's tertiary gross graduation ratio had reached 53%. This enormous expansion created a vast pool of engineers, scientists, programmers, researchers, and technically trained workers. And there was a strategic logic behind this investment. A country cannot become technologically independent simply by purchasing foreign technology. It needs people who can understand it, improve it, reproduce it, and eventually innovate beyond it. China therefore increasingly emphasized science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Universities expanded, research institutes grew, international scientific collaboration increased, and the number of Chinese researchers participating in global science expanded dramatically. Education became part of China's broader national development strategy. The objective was clear: move from being the world's factory to becoming one of the world's innovation centers. China today competes in areas that were once dominated primarily by Western economies and a small number of advanced Asian economies. Telecommunications, artificial intelligence, robotics, electric vehicles, battery technology, solar energy, high-speed rail, digital payments, e-commerce, drones, space technology, and advanced manufacturing. The scale of China's innovation system is difficult to ignore. According to the World Intellectual Property Organization, Chinese applicants filed approximately 70,160 international patent applications through the Patent Cooperation Treaty in 2024. That represented about 25.6% of all PCT applications and made China the world's largest source of PCT filings that year. China's Domestic Intellectual Property Office also received around 1.8 million patent applications in 2024. But patent numbers alone do not prove technological leadership. The more important question is whether scientific knowledge can be transformed into commercially competitive products. And this is where China's industrial ecosystem becomes particularly important. Consider electric vehicles. China has developed an enormous ecosystem connecting mineral processing, battery materials, battery cells, electronics, software, vehicle manufacturing, charging infrastructure, and consumer markets. According to the International Energy Agency, China accounted for approximately 70% of global electric car production in 2025. According to the International Energy Agency, China also accounted for more than 80% of global battery cell production. The same principle can be seen in solar energy. The IEA reports that China remains the dominant producer across major stages of the solar photovoltaic supply chain, including wafers and modules. This reveals something fundamental about China's economic model. Innovation is increasingly connected to manufacturing scale. A technology is not enough. The ability to produce it cheaply, quickly, and at enormous scale can be equally powerful. China's rise cannot be understood without considering the role of the state. The Chinese government has repeatedly identified strategic industries and directed resources toward them. Infrastructure, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, 5G telecommunications, renewable energy, electric vehicles, aerospace, advanced manufacturing. This approach has produced remarkable successes. But it has also generated controversy. Critics argue that subsidies, state-owned enterprises, preferential financing, industrial policies, and other forms of government intervention can distort competition and create overcapacity. Supporters argue that strategic industrial policy can accelerate technological development, especially in sectors where enormous upfront investment is required. The reality is more complicated. China's economic success cannot be explained by state intervention alone, nor can it be explained by market forces alone. Its rise has resulted from an interaction between state planning, market competition, private entrepreneurship, foreign investment, infrastructure, human capital, and enormous domestic demand. This combination has created an economic ecosystem with an extraordinary capacity to scale successful technologies. China's ambitions did not stop at its borders. In 2013, Beijing announced the Belt and Road Initiative, commonly known as the BRI. Its central idea was to strengthen connectivity through infrastructure, trade, investment, logistics, energy, ports, railways, roads, and increasingly digital networks. The initiative connected Chinese economic interests with projects across Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. The World Bank has noted that Belt and Road transport corridors could significantly reduce trade costs and stimulate economic activity, while also emphasizing important risks involving debt sustainability, transparency, environmental impacts, and governance. This dual character is important. The Belt and Road Initiative is simultaneously an economic, infrastructural, diplomatic, and geopolitical project. Infrastructure creates trade. Trade creates economic relationships. Economic relationships can create political influence, and political influence can strengthen a country's geopolitical position. In this sense, China has attempted to transform economic power into global influence. But global power is not measured only in factories, GDP, or military capabilities. Culture matters. Languages matter. Education matters. International perceptions matter. Political scientist Joseph Nye famously described this dimension as soft power, the ability to influence others through attraction rather than coercion. China has invested in this area as well. One example is the global expansion of Confucius Institutes and other Chinese cultural and educational initiatives. The first Confucius Institute opened in Seoul in 2004. Their stated purpose has included promoting Chinese language and culture through partnerships with foreign educational institutions. Academic research has examined these institutions as instruments of Chinese cultural diplomacy and soft power. At the same time, the subject remains controversial. Some scholars argue that China's cultural diplomacy has expanded its international reach. Others point to political controversies, questions about academic freedom, and limitations in China's ability to generate cultural attraction on the same scale as countries such as the United States. This distinction is important. Economic influence does not automatically produce cultural influence. China has enormous economic power, but converting economic strength into universally attractive cultural power remains a more complicated challenge. As China's economic and technological capabilities expanded, its geopolitical importance also increased. China became increasingly active in international institutions. It expanded diplomatic relationships. It strengthened military capabilities. It increased its presence in global infrastructure and trade. And it increasingly challenged the assumption that the United States would remain the only dominant center of global power. This has contributed to what is now commonly described as strategic competition between the United States and China. The competition extends far beyond military power. It includes semiconductors, artificial intelligence, telecommunications, rare earth supply chains, electric vehicles, space technology, data, global trade, financial systems, and international standards. In other words, the competition is about who will shape the technological and economic infrastructure of the 21st century. China's technological progress has also changed the nature of this competition. For years, China was often described primarily as a manufacturing power. Today, that description is incomplete. China is simultaneously a manufacturing power, a major scientific producer, a technological competitor, a financial actor, an infrastructure provider, and a geopolitical power. Yet the story of China's rise should not become a story of inevitable dominance. China faces serious challenges. Its population is aging, its working-age population is declining. Productivity growth has slowed. The property sector has experienced a prolonged downturn. Debt levels are high. Domestic consumption remains weaker than policymakers would like, and technological competition with the United States and other advanced economies creates external pressure. The International Monetary Fund estimated that China's real GDP grew by 5% in 2025 and projected growth of approximately 4.5% for 2026. But the IMF also warned that China's medium-term growth is likely to slow because of demographic change, declining returns on investment, and weaker productivity growth. Demography may become one of China's greatest long-term challenges. A country can build factories, it can construct railways, it can invest billions in artificial intelligence. But demographic transformation is much harder to reverse. China therefore faces a new question. Can it maintain high productivity and technological innovation as its population ages? The answer may determine the next phase of China's rise. So, how did China become a global superpower? There was no single answer. China's rise was built through a sequence of transformations: economic reform, industrialization, global trade integration, infrastructure, education, technological upgrading, and geopolitical strategy. The 21st century will be defined by competition among several centers of power, and at the center of that transformation stands China. And the most important chapter of that story may still be unwritten.